The Nexus station hummed with the kind of frantic energy typically reserved for impending apocalypses or tax audits. Representatives from 47 different species had crammed into the emergency assembly hall, a feat of engineering that required atmospheric processes, gravity adjusters, and enough air fresheners to mask the unfortunate reality that not all advanced civilizations had discovered deodorant. Ambassador HFY of the Modern Collective stood at the central podium, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into anxious rainbows. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present that a species evolved from living gemstones was about to discuss their desperate need for more gemstones. Evolution, it seemed, had a sense of humor as twisted as a politician's promise. Esteemed colleagues, HFY began, his voice resonating through the translation matrices with the gravitas of someone announcing the end of the universe. We face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our interstellar civilization. General Crickstar of the Vorthan Empire, a 7-foot-tall insectoid whose species had conquered half the known galaxy through sheer blood-mindedness, clicked his mandibles dismissively. Another crisis. Last month it was the Temporal Syndicate trying to retroactively uninvent warp drive. The month before, those idiots from Sector 7 nearly collapsed 3-star systems because they wanted to make their sun more aesthetically pleasing. Dr. Yalneth, representing the ethereal symbiosis, floated serenely in her containment field. Her species had transcended physical form eons ago, which made their current predicament particularly embarrassing. This is different, General. Our quantum computational networks are failing. Without the specific resonance crystals found only on Kepler 438b, we face complete civilizational collapse within 6 standard cycles. The chamber erupted in what could generously be called discussion, though it sounded more like a zoo at feeding time. The Modern Collective needed the crystals for their living computers. The Vorthan Empire required them for their reality-sharing weapons. The ethereal symbiosis used them to maintain their post-physical existence. Even the crystalline hierarchy, who were essentially living rocks, needed these particular rocks to prevent their entire species from having what amounted to a geological nervous breakdown. Coordinator Belmos of the crystalline hierarchy resonated at a frequency that made everyone's teeth ache. The problem, as we all know, is not the crystals themselves. It's their location. Yes, Kepler 438b. A planet so hostile to life that the universe seemed to have created it specifically as a cosmic joke. It wasn't just a death world, it was a death world, the gold standard by which all other nightmarish hellscapes were measured and found wanting. The planet boasted surface temperatures that could melt most starship hulls, atmospheric pressure that would compress a Vorthan warrior into a decorative paperweight, gravity so intense it could turn a floating ethereal into something resembling abstract art, and weather patterns that made hurricanes look like gentle summer breezes. The cherry on this apocalyptic sundae was a local fauna, creatures so aggressively evolved for violence that they made the Vorthan military look like a knitting circle. "Remind me again," General Crickstar said, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could corrode starship armor, "why these crystals couldn't have evolved somewhere nice? A pleasant garden world, perhaps? Maybe somewhere with breathable atmosphere and non-carnivorous landscape features." Dr. Yalneth's ethereal form shimmered with what might have been cosmic exasperation. The extreme conditions are precisely why the crystals developed their unique quantum properties. It's a planetary equivalent of pressure creating diamonds, except in this case, the pressure could also eat you. The previous attempts to retrieve the crystals had become the stuff of legend, cautionary tales told to young aliens to discourage careers in extreme geology. The Vorthan Empire had sent their elite Deathworld division, warriors bred specifically for impossible missions. They lasted 4 hours before their armor was dissolved by acid rain, while they were simultaneously being hunted by predators that existed in 17 dimensions. The Modern Collective had tried next, using their ability to interface directly with hostile environments. Their crystalline forms should have provided natural protection against most of the planet's hazards. Instead, they discovered that Kepler 438b hosted a unique species of crystal-eating bacteria that treated modern physiology like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The ethereal symbiosis had approached the problem with typical arrogance, assuming that post-physical nature would make them immune to physical threats. They learned that some things on Kepler 438b were so aggressively hostile they could literally frighten energy beings to death. The philosophical implications alone had kept their theologians busy for 3 standard years. Even the machine intelligence collective known as the binary nexus had failed spectacularly. Their remote-controlled extraction drones had been systematically hunted down and destroyed by what appeared to be the planet's apex predator, a creature that seemed to have evolved specifically to hate technology. The few surviving sensor readings suggested it looked like a cross between a tank, a hurricane, and a very angry mathematical theorem. 6 previous expeditions, HFY summarized, his crystalline form dimming with defeat. 47 of the galaxy's most capable individuals. 0 survivors, 0 crystals, 0 hope. The chamber fell silent except for the background hum of life support systems working overtime to keep 47 different atmospheric requirements from creating a chemical reaction that would probably violate several laws of physics. That's when Marcus Chen cleared his throat. The human had been sitting quietly in the designated observer section, largely ignored by the galactic representatives. Most species had trouble taking humans seriously. They were new to the galactic community, technologically primitive by galactic standards, and had the unfortunate habit of breathing oxygen and drinking water like some kind of basic biological peasants. Marcus looked exactly like what galactic civilization expected from a human: average height, unremarkable features, wearing what appeared to be a modified environmental suit that probably cost less than a Vothan general's breakfast. His most notable characteristic was the way he seemed completely unfazed by the chamber full of beings who could casually rearrange matter or exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the translation matrices. "Did someone say Deathworld?" General Krickstar's compound eyes focused on the human with a kind of attention typically reserved for interesting parasites. "Human, this is not a matter for junior species. We're discussing Kepler 438b, the most hostile environment in known space." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Right, the one with the high gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, and aggressive wildlife." "Among other things, yes," Dr. Yelnath said, her ethereal form radiating condescension. "Perhaps you don't understand the severity." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Marcus interrupted, standing up with the casual confidence of someone who had never read the Galactic Safety Manual. "Sounds like Tuesday." The chamber erupted in what could charitably be called laughter, though it sounded more like 47 different species attempting to express amusement in ways that violated several acoustic principles. "Tuesday." Coordinator Belmos resonated incredulously. "Human, your homeworld is classified as a god in paradise by galactic standards." Marcus's smile was the kind that made seasoned negotiators nervous. "That's the thing about perspective, isn't it? See, what you call a death world, we call home. Earth's got pretty much everything you mentioned, plus a few extras we threw in for variety." The laughter died as the representatives began to process what the human was actually saying. Earth was indeed classified as unusually hospitable, stable climate, abundant water, breathable atmosphere, relatively benign geology. It was the kind of planet most species could only dream of colonizing. "Stable, sure," Marcus continued conversationally, "if you ignore the hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, lightning storms, blizzards, droughts, floods, and the occasional asteroid impact. Oh, and the wildlife." General Krickstar's mandibles clicked nervously. "Wildlife. Well, let's see. We've got creatures that can kill you with venom, claws, teeth, crushing force, electric shock, or just by being really, really large. Some of them hunt in packs. Some of them hunt alone. Some of them hunt other hunters for sport. And that's just the land animals." Dr. Yelnatha's ethereal form flickered with what might have been concern. "Land animals. The ocean's was," Marcus said cheerfully. "Bigger predators, more creative ways to kill you, plus the added bonus of drowning if you're not careful. And then there's the microscopic stuff, bacteria, viruses, parasites that would make your crystalline hierarchy's worst nightmares look like a relaxing vacation." The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the atmospheric processes seemed to be holding their breath. "So," Marcus continued, reaching for a battered duffel bag that had been sitting at his feet, "when you say Kepler 438b is the most hostile environment in known space, I hate Tuesday with slightly more gravity." When you say the local predators are aggressively evolved for violence, I think so, like Australian wildlife, but in space. HFY's crystalline form had taken on the kind of glow typically associated with systems approaching critical failure. Human, surely you're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything, Marcus said, slinging the bag over his shoulder. I'm volunteering. The explosion of protests from 47 different species created a cacophony that probably violated several noise ordinances and at least one law of thermodynamics. Through it all, Marcus stood calmly, waiting for the chaos to subside with the patience of someone who had clearly dealt with worse. This is preposterous. General Crickstar finally managed. Humans have no experience with extreme environments. Marcus pulled out what appeared to be a primitive handheld device. This is a smartphone, he said. It contains more computational power than your average starship's navigation system. We use them primarily for looking at pictures of cats and arguing with strangers. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up to show a series of images that made several representatives recoil in horror. These are vacation photos, Marcus explained. That's Mount Everest, 8.5 kilometers high, temperatures that'll freeze your blood. Air so thin you need mechanical assistance to breathe. Humans climb it for fun. That's the Mariana Trench. Deeper than most of your starships can dive, pressure that would crush a Vorthan warrior into component atoms. Humans go down there to see what's at the bottom. He swiped to the next image. That's Antarctica. Colder than a crystalline hierarchy's emotional range. Winds that could strip the atmosphere off a small moon, completely hostile to human life. We built research stations there and stayed for years at a time. The next image showed what appeared to be a human surrounded by creatures that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of nightmares. That's my cousin Dave swimming with great white sharks. Dave's an accountant. Dr. Yelnetha's ethereal form was flickering erratically. But surely your technology is primitive by your standards. Yes, Marcus agreed. We don't have reality-sharing weapons or post-physical existence or crystalline network interfaces. What we have is about 4 billion years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill us every single day, and the stubborn refusal to admit when we're beaten. He held up a device that looked like it had been assembled by someone with a very loose understanding of engineering principles. This is my environmental suit. It's designed using principles we figured out about 50 years ago. The Vorthan Deathworld Division's armor could probably withstand a direct hit from a starship's main cannon. This thing can keep me alive in a blizzard, a desert, underwater, or in a toxic atmosphere for about 12 hours. The device beeped cheerfully, displaying readouts in what appeared to be a primitive alphanumeric system. The difference, Marcus continued, is that when Vorthan armor fails, it fails catastrophically. When human equipment fails, we fix it with whatever we can find lying around and keep going. We've been doing that for our entire evolutionary history. Coordinator Belmos resonated at a frequency that suggested deep philosophical confusion. But the calculations show that survival is mathematically impossible. Marcus's smile took on the kind of quality that made mathematicians nervous. Humans have a saying, the difficult we do immediately. The impossible takes a little longer. We also have another saying, hold my beer and watch this. He reached into his bag and pulled out what appeared to be a primitive chemical analysis kit, a roll of flexible material, several small devices of uncertain purpose, and a sealed container of what looked like dirt. Basic survival kit, he explained. Chemical analyzer, emergency shelter, water purification system, and soil samples from every major biome on Earth. If I can't figure out how to survive somewhere using what I learned as a Boy Scout, I'll eat my hat. General Crickstar's compound eyes focused on the container of dirt with a kind of horrified fascination typically reserved for weaponized pathogens. You brought soil. Compost, actually, Marcus corrected. You'd be surprised how many problems you can solve with the right bacteria. Earth's microbiome has been at war with itself for billions of years. Our gut bacteria could probably colonize most of your homeworlds without breaking a sweat. The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated the implications of a species whose symbiotic microorganisms were apparently more resilient than most galactic civilizations. So, Marcus said, slinging his bag over his shoulder, if someone could point me toward the shuttle bay, I've got a Deathworld to visit. The next few hours passed in a blur of increasingly frantic preparations. The Galactic representatives found themselves in the unprecedented position of trying to provide support for a mission they were convinced was elaborate suicide. Marcus, meanwhile, spent the time making minor adjustments to his equipment and cheerfully ignoring everyone's attempts to talk him out of what they clearly considered a death wish. Dr. Yalneth had insisted on running him through a battery of physical and psychological evaluations, apparently expecting to find some evidence of human delusion or ignorance that would explain his confidence. Instead, she discovered that humans possessed an unusual combination of physiological adaptability and psychological resilience that bordered on the supernatural. "Your stress response systems are completely backwards," she complained, her ethereal form flickering with scientific frustration. When faced with mortal danger, most species experience fear, panic, or at least a reasonable sense of self-preservation. You appear to become calmer and more focused. Marcus shrugged, testing the seal on his water recycling system. Panic gets you killed. Fear makes you stupid. Better to just focus on the next step. General Krickstar had tried a different approach, providing Marcus with detailed intelligence reports on Kepler 438b's hazards. The human had read through 47 different ways the planet could kill him, with the same casual interest most people showed when reading a restaurant menu. "The atmospheric composition will corrode most metals within hours," the general warned. "Good thing this suit's ceramic and polymer," Marcus replied, tapping his chest plate. The local predators hunt in coordinated packs and show tactical intelligence approaching sentience. So did saber-toothed tigers. We made those extinct with pointed sticks. The gravitational stress will make every movement exhausting. I grew up in Colorado. High altitude, thin air, lots of mountains. This'll be good cardio. Coordinator Belmos had tried the mathematical approach, presenting Marcus with detailed calculations proving that human survival on Kepler 438b was statistically impossible. Marcus had listened politely, then pulled out his smartphone and showed the coordinator a video of humans doing something called park hour in an urban environment that looked like it had been designed by someone with a grudge against physics. "Math's useful," he said, "but sometimes you just have to wing it." The final attempt came from HFY himself, who made one last appeal to human reason. "Marcus," the crystalline being said, his form pulsing with genuine concern, "I understand your species' reputation for stubbornness, but this is not a matter of determination. Kepler 438b has defeated every attempt at colonization, exploration, or resource extraction. It is, quite literally, the most hostile environment we have ever encountered." Marcus looked out the observation deck at the shuttle that would carry him to his probable death. It was a standard transport, designed for safety and reliability rather than speed or style. The kind of vehicle that suggested its designers had never met a regulation they didn't like. "You know what the funny thing is?" Marcus said quietly. "You're all looking at this like it's some kind of ultimate challenge, the final boss of hostile environments. But from where I'm standing, it just looks like a planet with some problems that need solving." He turned back to face the alien ambassador, and for a moment, HFY saw something in the human's eyes that made his crystalline structure resonate with frequencies he didn't recognize. "See, the thing about humans is that we're not actually that impressive individually. We're not the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. We can't interface with technology directly. We can't exist in multiple dimensions. We don't have natural armor or energy projection or any of the cool abilities your species developed." Marcus picked up his bag and started walking toward the shuttle bay. "What we have is about 4 billion years of surviving on a planet that's been trying to kill us since the day we crawled out of the ocean. We've survived ice ages and volcanic winters, plagues and famines, predators and parasites, and every natural disaster you can imagine. And we didn't just survive, we thrived." He paused at the airlock, looking back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "You want to know the secret? We don't see problems as insurmountable obstacles. We see them as puzzles that just haven't been solved yet. And humans," he smiled that unsettling human smile, "are very, very good at solving puzzles." The shuttle departed exactly on schedule, carrying one human and enough supplies for a week-long mission to what everyone except Marcus considered certain death. The Galactic representatives settled in to wait for news, most of them already composing the inevitable eulogy for humanity's first and final contribution to interstellar cooperation. They didn't have to wait long. 18 hours later, Marcus's voice crackled through the communication system with the casual tone of someone calling to report a minor traffic delay. Nexus Station, this is Chen. I've reached the surface and established a base camp. Weather's not great, but I've seen worse. Beginning survey operations tomorrow. Chen out. The stunned silence that followed lasted approximately 37 seconds before the communication bot exploded with incoming signals from every species representative simultaneously. Human. General Krickstar's voice cut through the chaos. Report your status immediately. Status is good, Marcus replied cheerfully. Found a nice cave system about 2 clicks from the landing site. Sealed it up, purified the air, got a little hydroponics garden started. The local wildlife is definitely aggressive, but they are also curious. Spent most of the afternoon playing what I can only describe as the galaxy's most dangerous game of peek-a-boo, with something that looks like a cross between a tank and a disco ball. Dr. Yelneth's ethereal form was strobing so rapidly she was creating her own light show. How are you managing the atmospheric toxicity? Turns out my chemical analyzer was right. Most of the deadly toxins are just complex organic compounds. I've seen worse coming out of chemical plants back home. The scrubber system is handling it fine, and I've already identified 3 different atmospheric components that are actually beneficial to human physiology. One of them's apparently a mild stimulant. I feel great. Coordinator Belmos resonated at a frequency that suggested the beginning of a nervous breakdown. The gravity should be crushing you. Nah, it's not that bad. Maybe twice Earth normal? I grew up in military family. My dad had me doing calisthenics in a weighted vest from age 12. This is like a really good workout. The reports continued for the next 5 days, each one more impossible than the last. Marcus had not only survived on Kepler 438b, he was apparently thriving. He'd mapped the local terrain, catalogued 17 different species of what he cheerfully called death lizards, established a sustainable food production system using modified Earth bacteria, and most impossibly of all, had begun what he described as making friends with the neighbors. The big disco ball thing turned out to be pretty smart, Marcus reported on day 4. I think it was trying to figure out if I was edible. Once I showed it I wasn't planning to eat it either. We worked out a kind of mutual non-aggression pact. It's actually been helping me map the cave systems. I'm calling it Steve. You named the apex predators Steve. General Krickstar asked weakly. Steve the sparkly death ball, Marcus confirmed. Steve's got a sense of humor, I think. Yesterday it brought me what I'm pretty sure was a practical joke. A crystal formation that looked exactly like the quantum resonance crystals you're looking for, but was actually just really shiny rock. Steve thought it was hilarious. Wait, HFY interrupted, his crystalline form suddenly blazing with intensity. You found the crystals. Oh yeah, about that, Marcus said casually. Found your crystal deposits on day 2. There's a whole cave system full of them about 5 clicks south of my base camp. Steve showed me the way. Turns out the locals have been using them as decoration for about 1,000 years. They've got quite the artistic tradition going. The silence that followed was so complete that several species' life support systems began running diagnostic checks, assuming their occupants had died of shock. You found them on day 2, Dr. Yelneth said faintly, and you're just mentioning this now. Well, I wanted to make sure I could actually extract them safely, Marcus explained. Took a few days to work out the logistics. The crystals are integrated into the cave ecosystem. Removing them incorrectly would have destabilized the whole network and probably collapsed about 100 kilometers of tunnel systems. Had to figure out a sustainable harvesting method that wouldn't damage the local environment or upset the neighbors. Sustainable harvesting, Coordinator Belmos repeated numbly. Right. Turns out the crystals grow back if you only take the mature formations and leave the root systems intact. Basic conservation biology. I've set up a rotation schedule with Steve and the other locals. They get to keep their decorations. You get your quantum crystals. Everybody wins. General Krickstar's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like machine gun fire. You negotiated a mining agreement with the predators. More of a cultural exchange program. Really, Marcus corrected. They are not predators so much as really aggressive landscapers. The whole planet's basically one big art project. They've been terraforming this place for millennia, creating what they consider the perfect aesthetic environment. All that hostile geology you were worried about, that's intentional. It's their version of a Japanese garden. The revelation that Kepler-438b's deadly environment was actually an alien art installation managed to create a silence so profound it probably violated several laws of thermodynamics. Anyway, Marcus continued cheerfully, I've got about 50 kilograms of prime quantum crystals ready for transport, plus detailed geological surveys, cultural exchange protocols, and a preliminary trade agreement. Steve's people are interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic community. They've got some really interesting ideas about environmental engineering that I think you'd find fascinating. Trade agreement, HFY whispered. Oh, and they've invited me to extend my stay for their seasonal festival next month. Apparently it involves rearranging continental plates for artistic effect. Should be spectacular. The shuttle that retrieved Marcus Chen from Kepler-438 carried not just the human and his precious cargo of quantum crystals, but also 3 passengers that made the dock workers question their career choices. Steve the sparkly death ball had insisted on seeing Marcus off personally, along with 2 companions that Marcus introduced as Fluffy and Mr. Bitey. The creatures that had terrorized 6 previous expeditions turned out to be curious, intelligent, and possessed of what could only be described as a cosmic sense of humor. They found the Galactic representatives' terror absolutely hilarious, spending most of the farewell ceremony making what Marcus assured everyone were friendly gestures, though they looked suspiciously like threats of creative dismemberment. The formal debriefing took place in the same chamber where the crisis had begun, though the atmosphere had changed considerably. Instead of desperate panic, the air now thrummed with the kind of nervous energy typically associated with paradigm shifts and existential recalculations. Marcus sat comfortably in a chair that had been hastily modified to accommodate his primitive physiology, surrounded by 4 to 7 of the galaxy's most advanced beings, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from bewilderment to something approaching religious awe. So, General Crickstar said carefully, let me make sure I understand this correctly. The most hostile planet in known space is actually a nature preserve created by a species of artistic landscape architects who are perfectly willing to establish trade relations with anyone polite enough to ask. Pretty much, Marcus confirmed, taking a sip from a beverage container that made several representatives nervous. Though I'd say landscape artists rather than architects. Steve's people don't just rearrange terrain, they compose symphonies in geological time. What we saw as deadly hazards, they see as aesthetic choices. The acid rain? That's their version of mood lighting. Dr. Yalnetha's ethereal form was flickering in patterns that suggested deep philosophical confusion. But the previous expeditions, they were all killed by hostile wildlife. Nah, Marcus said, waving a hand dismissively. They were killed by bad manners. The silence that followed had the quality of 4 to 7 different minds simultaneously attempting to process information that didn't fit into any existing conceptual framework. Bad manners. Coordinator Belmo's resonated weakly. Think about it from their perspective, Marcus explained patiently. You spend 1,000 years creating the perfect artistic environment, and then strangers show up in your garden wearing military armor, carrying weapons, and trying to strip mine your decorations without so much as a hello. How would you react? General Crickstar's compound eyes focused on the human with the kind of intensity typically reserved for examining particularly dangerous explosives. You're saying the previous expeditions failed because they were rude? Essentially, yeah. Steve's people are artists, not warriors. But they are also very protective of their work. When heavily armed military forces showed up and started blasting holes in their carefully crafted landscape without permission, they defended their art the only way they knew how. Marcus pulled out his smartphone and showed them a series of images that made several representatives recoil in recognition. These are the deadly predators that wiped out 6 expeditions, he said cheerfully. That's Steve in his formal regalia. He was apparently trying to introduce himself properly when the Vothan Deathworld division opened fire. That's Fluffy demonstrating traditional greeting rituals, which the modern collective interpreted as an attack pattern. And that's Mr. Bitey attempting to offer ceremonial gifts, which the binary Nexus drones apparently mistook for weapons. The images showed the same creatures that had starred in nightmare reports and tactical briefings, but from Marcus's perspective, they looked less like engines of destruction and more like very large, very enthusiastic artists trying to communicate with visitors who had missed all the social cues. The whole thing was just a massive cultural misunderstanding, Marcus continued. Steve's people don't have a concept of individual ownership the way we do. To them, the crystals aren't resources to be mined. They are part of a living artwork that they've been cultivating for centuries. When strangers showed up and started taking pieces without asking, it was like someone walking into a museum and trying to steal the paintings. HFY's crystalline form was pulsing with what might have been embarrassment. So when you approached them, I knocked first, Marcus said simply. Well, metaphorically speaking. I made camp outside their main artistic district, waited for them to notice me, and then spent a few days figuring out how to say hello in their cultural language. Turns out they appreciate visitors who take time to understand their work before making requests. The debriefing continued for several more hours, with Marcus patiently explaining how basic human social skills had succeeded where advanced military tactics had failed spectacularly. The quantum crystals were examined, verified, and found to be of exceptional quality. Apparently, artistic cultivation had produced specimens far superior to anything that could have been extracted through conventional mining. More importantly, the cultural exchange protocols Marcus had established opened possibilities that nobody had considered. Steve's people possessed environmental engineering techniques that could transform hostile worlds into gardens, artistic traditions that treated entire solar systems as canvases, and a philosophical approach to time and space that made the ethereal symbiosis look positively narrow-minded. As the formal sessions wound down and the representatives began making plans for proper diplomatic contact with Kepler 438b, Marcus found himself alone with HFY in the observation lounge, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed a little less empty and a lot more interesting. I have to ask, HFY said quietly, his crystalline form reflecting the starlight in thoughtful patterns. How did you know it would work? How could you be so confident when everyone else saw only certain death? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, sipping his primitive beverage and watching the cosmic dance of distant suns. You want the philosophical answer or the practical one? He asked finally. Both. Marcus smiled, and for once, it was neither unsettling nor sarcastic, just genuinely amused. Practical answer. Humans have been dealing with hostile environments and dangerous neighbors for our entire evolutionary history. We learned a long time ago that most problems have solutions if you're willing to think creatively and treat everyone involved as intelligent beings with their own motivations and perspectives. He took another sip, then continued. Philosophical answer. You all made the same mistake. You looked at Kepler 438b and saw everything that could kill you. I looked at it and saw everything that was trying to live. There's a big difference between a world that's hostile to life and a world that's just different from what you're used to. HFY's form brightened with understanding. You saw it as another Earth. Not another Earth, Marcus corrected gently. I saw it as home to someone else. And humans have a rule about visiting other people's homes. You mind your manners, respect the local customs, and always bring something for the host. He gestured toward the datapad containing the trade agreements and cultural exchange protocols. Steve's people got quantum crystals. We got quantum crystals. But more importantly, they got recognition as a civilization with their own values and traditions, and we got to learn from beings who think about art and time and space in ways we never imagined. Everybody wins. The crystalline ambassador was quiet for a long time, processing implications that stretched far beyond a single successful resource extraction mission. Marcus, he said finally, what you've accomplished here changes everything. Not just our energy crisis, but our entire approach to exploration and first contact. You've shown us that there are solutions we never considered, perspectives we never imagined. Marcus shrugged, the gesture somehow managing to convey both humility and confidence. That's the thing about being human, he said. We're not the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. But we're really, really good at making friends with the neighbors. even when the neighbors happened to be hyper-intelligent artists who express themselves through geological engineering and consider continental drift a form of interpretive dance. He finished his drink and stood up, stretching in the way of someone whose body was still adjusting to normal gravity. Besides, he added with that characteristic human grin, Steve invited me to their next festival. Apparently they are planning to relocate 3 mountain ranges to create a new artistic motif. Should be fun. As Marcus headed for the door, HFY called after him. Human. Yeah. Next time we encounter a Deathworld that needs investigating. Marcus paused, his hand on the door control, and his smile took on that particularly unsettling quality that made Galactic representatives nervous. Next time, he said cheerfully, you might want to lead with "we found some neighbors who could use a visit" instead of "who wants to volunteer for certain death." Trust me, you'll get better results. The door closed behind him, leaving HFY alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that perhaps the galaxy's newest member species wasn't quite as primitive as they'd assumed. Outside the observation lounge, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of biological intelligence. But in the wake of one human's successful mission to the galaxy's most feared Deathworld, those stars seemed somehow less distant and considerably more welcoming. After all, if Marcus Chen could make friends with artistic landscape architects who express themselves through controlled volcanic activity, what other neighbors might be waiting out there in the cosmic darkness, hoping someone would finally knock on their door and ask politely if they'd like to chat? The universe, it seemed, was about to become a much more interesting place.